All right, today we're jumping into a really powerful idea about personal transformation. It's pulled from a devotional text, and it all boils down to this one central theme: the power of a renewed mind. So what does that actually mean? Let's get into it. So, the whole idea, everything we're about to unpack, it actually hinges on this one single verse from the book of Romans. It sets up this really fundamental choice we all face. Do you just conform to the world around you, or do you choose to be transformed from the inside out? And the key to that transformation? Well, the verse says it's all about renewing your mind. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about the core problem this text is trying to solve. It basically frames our everyday life as this central conflict, a choice that we're always having to make.
And here's that choice laid out plain and simple. On one hand, you've got conformity, just going with the flow, adopting the world's way of thinking. But on the other hand, there's transformation. And that's described as this internal process that, according to the source, starts completely and totally in your mind. This decision is positioned as like the most crucial first step if you want any real, lasting change.
All right, so if transformation is the goal, then what's the tool? How do you actually do it? Well, the source material is super specific about the main instrument for this change, and it's something every single one of us has.
See, according to this text, your mind isn't just, a part of the process. It's pretty much everything. It's the starting line. It's the main tool you have for shaping your entire life. The source claims that the whole blueprint for your growth and for having dominion in your life, it all starts right there, inside your head.
But what is a renewed mind exactly? The devotional gives a really clear definition. It's a mind that is regulated by the Word. It's even called an excellent mind, one that's running on a totally different operating system than our default settings.
And this comparison really drives the point home, doesn't it? On one side, you have the worldly mind. It's described as being conformed, kind of dominated by what's going on outside, and often it's running on fear. But the renewed mind, that's the complete opposite. It's aligned with God's Word, and because of that, it produces faith and boldness. We're talking about a complete internal overhaul here.
Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, right? But how do you actually do it? What are the practical steps? Well, the source lays out a really clear how-to for making this mental renewal happen.
It really comes down to 3 intentional actions. First, it's about making a conscious exchange, literally swapping out your own thoughts for what the text calls God's thoughts. The second step is meditation, which here means just keeping your mind stayed on His Word. And finally, it's about actively choosing your focus, pointing your thoughts towards specific, virtuous things.
And that third step, about focus, it comes straight from this verse in Philippians. It's a direct instruction to deliberately fill your mind with things that are true and honest and just and pure. The core idea is actually pretty simple. What you choose to focus on, that's what your mind ultimately becomes.
So let's say you do this. You follow the method. What happens then? Well, the text promises some very specific, very real results that come from this kind of mental transformation.
One of the biggest promises is something called perfect peace. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the text digs into the Hebrew word shalom. It makes it clear that shalom isn't just, the absence of conflict. It's a much bigger, more holistic kind of peace, one that actually includes prosperity.
And the results don't stop there. The source claims that as your mind gets renewed, fear just disappears. And what replaces it? Faith and boldness. And that internal shift naturally leads to external changes. You start to think and act differently, making your decisions from a place of wisdom and dominion. The ultimate outcome that's promised here is a life that is genuinely excellent and full of glory.
So, how do you tie all of this together in your day-to-day life? Well, the source leaves us with one last, really powerful metaphor that kind of sums the whole thing up.
And it all comes down to this simple idea. A renewed mind is like a new lens for your eyes. So instead of interpreting everything that happens to you through a lens of fear or worldly thinking, the instruction is to use God's Word as the filter for literally everything you see and experience.
And that really brings us to the final question that the text poses. It flips the whole thing back on us, moving from just understanding the idea to actually applying it. The question is incredibly simple, but it's also really profound. What lens are you using to interpret your world?